It was an ordinary day at Pinewood High School, located in a serene suburb of Florida. The students were bustling around, immersed in their usual routines. Among them was Jake Miller, a senior known for his quiet demeanor and excellent grades. Jake had always been a bit of a loner, often keeping to himself. However, in recent months, his behavior had become increasingly erratic. Jake's friends and teachers noticed the change, but attributed it to the pressures of senior year. He had withdrawn from social activities. His once vibrant eyes now seemed clouded with a hidden burden. Rumors began to circulate about his troubled home life, but no one seemed to know the full story. The school guidance counselor, Mrs. Thompson, had called Jake in for a few meetings, but he remained tight-lipped about his struggles. He assured her that everything was fine, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. On a seemingly ordinary Wednesday, the school day began as usual. Students shuffled to their classes, teachers prepared their lessons, and the morning announcements echoed through the halls. Jake arrived at school, his backpack slung over one shoulder, blending into the crowd as he always did. Unbeknownst to his peers and teachers, Jake had reached a breaking point. The mounting pressures, the isolation, and unresolved trauma had driven him to a dark place. That morning, he had made a decision that would forever alter the lives of everyone at Pinewood High. As the clock struck 10:01 a.m., the tranquility of the school was shattered by the sound of gunfire. Panic spread like wildfire as students and teachers scrambled to comprehend what was happening. The school's intercom crackled to life, and Principal Roberts' voice, filled with urgency and fear, announced a lockdown. "Attention, students and staff. This is not a drill. We are in lockdown. Please follow lockdown." Chaos erupted as teachers locked classroom doors and turned off the lights. Students huddled in corners, their faces pale with fear. The once familiar surroundings of the school now felt like a prison. Whispers of confusion and terror filled the darkened rooms. In Mrs. Carter's history class, the students could hear the faint but distinct sound of gunshots. The reality of the situation set in as they realized that the shooter was moving through the school, methodically making his way from one area to another. The usually calm Mrs. Carter struggled to maintain her composure as she whispered reassurances to her students. Jake, armed and filled with a volatile mix of anger and despair, roamed the halls. He fired indiscriminately, his actions driven by a twisted sense of retribution. The school, once a place of learning and friendship, had become a battleground. Amidst the horror, acts of bravery began to unfold. Mr. Hernandez, the school's gym teacher, was in the cafeteria when the shooting started. Without hesitation, he guided a group of students to the nearest exit, ensuring their safety before doubling back to help others. In the science wing, Ms. Daniels, a biology teacher, barricaded her classroom door with desks and lab tables. She maintained a calm demeanor, instructing her students to stay quiet and hidden. Her quick thinking and composed actions likely saved their lives. In the main office, Principal Roberts coordinated with law enforcement, who had swiftly responded to the 911 calls. The police set up a perimeter around the school, preparing to enter and neutralize the threat. Inside, the school resource officer, Officer Martinez, took it upon himself to locate and stop the shooter. Officer Martinez moved through the school with caution, his training guiding his every step. He listened intently, trying to pinpoint the shooter's location. The echoing gunshots provided a grim trail to follow. As he approached the library, the sounds grew louder. In the library, Jake had cornered a group of students. Fear was etched on their faces as they tried to find cover behind bookshelves and tables. Jake's eyes were wild, a mix of anger and pain driving his actions. Just as he raised his weapon, Officer Martinez burst into the room. "Drop the gun, Jake!" Officer Martinez shouted, his voice firm and authoritative. Jake turned, his expression a blend of confusion and rage. "Stay back!" he yelled, his hands trembling. "Jake, this doesn't have to end this way," Officer Martinez said, taking a cautious step forward. "We can help you. Just put the gun down." For a moment, it seemed as if Jake might listen. His grip on the weapon loosened and his eyes filled with tears. But then, something inside him snapped. With a primal scream, he aimed at the officer. A shot rang out, followed by a second. The room fell silent as Jake collapsed to the floor, clutching his wounded shoulder. Officer Martinez quickly disarmed him and called for medical assistance. The nightmare was over, but the aftermath had just begun. The lockdown was lifted, and students and staff emerged from their hiding places, dazed and traumatized. Parents who had been anxiously waiting outside the school rushed to embrace their children. The once serene suburb was now the site of a tragedy that would leave an indelible mark on the community. Jake was taken into custody and transported to a hospital for his injuries. The investigation that followed revealed a troubled young man who had slipped through the cracks. His journal, found in his locker, painted a picture of deep despair and a longing for revenge against those he felt had wronged him. Counselors and psychologists were brought in to help the students and staff process the trauma. Vigils were held to honor the victims and support the survivors. The community, though shaken, came together in solidarity, determined to heal and prevent such a tragedy from happening again. In the months that followed, Pinewood High School underwent significant changes. Security measures were heightened, including the installation of metal detectors and surveillance cameras. The school administration worked closely with mental health professionals to provide ongoing support for students and staff. Emily, a junior who had been in Mrs. Carter's class during the lockdown, struggled with nightmares and anxiety. She found solace in a support group formed by survivors of the incident. Together, they shared their experiences and worked through their fears, finding strength in their shared resilience. Principal Roberts spearheaded an initiative to improve mental health resources at the school. He emphasized the importance of communication and support, encouraging students to speak up if they were struggling. The school also implemented regular active shooter drills, ensuring that everyone knew how to respond in an emergency. As time passed, the wounds began to heal, though the scars remained. The memory of the shooting was never far from the minds of those who had lived through it. However, the community's determination to move forward was unwavering. Jake's trial brought further closure to the ordeal. He was sentenced to a long-term facility where he would receive the mental health treatment he so desperately needed. The court proceedings were difficult for many, reopening old wounds, but they also provided a sense of justice and accountability. Years later, the story of Pinewood High School's shooting was still told, but it had taken on a new tone. It was no longer just a tale of tragedy, but also one of resilience, community, and hope. The school had become a model for how to address mental health and security in educational institutions. Emily, now a college student studying psychology, often returned to Pinewood to speak to students about her experience. She had turned her trauma into a mission to help others, advocating for mental health awareness and the importance of seeking help. Principal Roberts, nearing retirement, looked back on the years following the incident with a mix of sorrow and pride. The school had faced an unimaginable challenge, but they had come through it stronger and more united. He knew that the lessons learned from that day would continue to shape the community for generations to come. The shooting at Pinewood High School left an indelible mark on everyone it touched. It was a day of unimaginable horror, but also one of incredible bravery and resilience. The community's response to the tragedy set a precedent for how to handle such events, emphasizing the importance of mental health resources and comprehensive safety measures.